Welcome to a new episode of Melt. I'm Ritvika Gupta. Content creation and production has been garnering remarkable momentum in recent years. The rise of OTT platforms in India has allowed viewers to consume content from all around the world. In fact, the pandemic induced lockdown last year opened up growth avenues in video streaming like never before. To find out more about the content business in India, Anant Rangaswamy, editor of Melt, will be in conversation today with Samir Nair, CEO, Applause Entertainment. Applause Entertainment is a Mumbai-based media content and IP creation studio backed by the Aditya Birla Group of companies. Let's get ready to melt with Samir Nair.
Hi, Samir.
Hello, how are you?
Good, Samir. Good to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, very interesting time. I think 10 minutes before I came onto this interview, I read that a new content company has been announced. And now it's a new content company being announced every 10, 15 days. So tell me, give me your view, blue sky almost, on what the content business is going to be like in the next few years.
Well, we are going through a very interesting phase of really the content business being really fueled by the streaming services.
Right.
In the past, the content business was either an open source, you make content, put it on YouTube, which everyone could do. So that also saw a spurt of a lot of content creators, but the monetization was much harder. TV, as you know, has got gatekeepers. Films, as you know, has got gatekeepers because you need to go through theaters or through TV channels to release that content. They are themselves controlled by number of shows per day or number of slots available on the channel. So there are natural boundaries to the way both TV and films work. The streaming business, on the other hand, is a veritable infinite kind of library. There is no such thing as we have no space for any more shows. You can have a million more, right? It may be a different matter that no one consumes them, but you can definitely put them up onto the internet, onto the cloud. So that's really opened a genuine Pandora's box. It allows us to create all kinds of shows. It allows us to cater to a mass of niches rather than just a mass, right? And individual audiences, even in a house, can slice or dice their content of what they want to consume, what they don't want to consume. So it's fantastic what the streaming services, what the internet and this cloud storage has done for this business. So needless to say, when there is so much excitement and there's so much happening, a lot of people are drawn to the market because obviously there's a huge appetite for content, there's a huge hunger for content. There's a lot of need for content. We don't have enough content. Typically consumers finish watching a show on the weekend and then they're looking for the second season, which is going to come like 12 months or 18 months later. So, there's a lot of demand. India itself has never seen this kind of premium series, this kind of content. We've had one version of daily soap television, and then we've got the movies that we make. So this kind of, cinematic television is something that's never been seen in India. So obviously there's a huge interest in that. So I think all of these factors are contributing towards this sort of, boom in the content business. It's attracting a lot of people to the business. And, everyone wants to set up a content company because they think, it's the thing to do. There are 2-3 things, however, to it. One is, of course, the way you set it up and who's financing it. Because finally, at the end of the day, including content and creativity, it's all about who's financing the kingdom. So I think these are the things that sort of will dictate how this plays out.
Samir, say if you go back to 95, 96, 97, when you were in linear broadcast television, we saw a new production house being born every third day, especially in the business of, say, music videos and so on, feeding Channel V and MTV and so on.
Right.
And then we saw a lot of companies fail at that time. So do you think a similar thing will happen? Because it's not difficult to imagine that you're a content genius.
Well, actually, success or failure in this is two parts. One is the natural blockages that occur for a content creator to create content and put it out there to consumers, which is the fact that you have to pay for it, right? The better the quality of the content, the more it's going to cost. If you have to do that and you have to self-finance it, then it's a lot of money to be spent. If you're waiting for someone to commission you, then that's a gatekeeper. So there is a natural gatekeeper built. So, you can have 1,000 content companies set up, but if they are not self-financed companies, that means they are waiting for someone to commission them, waiting for someone to greenlight it. And that's the sort of cycle that it follows. It's a vicious cycle or a virtuous cycle, whichever is the case. Then the second thing that comes into this is that having created content, it's got to have succeeded, as in it's got to resonate with audiences, with critics, with the platform. People must be happy. They must get their metrics sort of, they must tick all the boxes, and then you get more work. So I don't think the content business is as easy as it's made out to be. Of course, everyone has a great idea in them, one great idea, and everyone wants to sort of, write that one book or make that one show or one movie. But to build a business of scale, I think will require a lot more discipline and a lot more effort and investment into it.
One of the words you used was metrics, and it's a word that I completely love, whether it's print metrics or out of home or radio or whatever. So how do they measure whether Applause's shows have done well, other than the obvious, which is number of people who have viewed it? Are there any other metrics that you look at? Maybe the streaming service will look only at that. What do you look at?
Well, actually, the metrics that are being followed is things that we are hearing from the streaming service itself in conversations with them. So there are 3-4 important things for them, obviously. One is that the existing subscribers who've consumed that content, whether that content has been consumed till the very end, so their completion rate or time spent, as we call on TV, the new subscribers that it attracts to become subscribers to watch this content. And so there are these 3-4 things that they follow, which are really fundamental to their own business models. So like many times we hear that a show has done really well for them, but it got no new subscribers, so it didn't tick that box. Or that a show, it opened with a lot of bang, but dropped off after episode 2 or 3. So, I mean, broadly from our scheme of things, I think these are the 3 most fundamental things. Do the existing subscriber base, like that content and watch it? Does it help them get new subscribers? And do they finish watching what they're seeing? If those 3 things are happening to whatever percentages that the platform has set up for itself, I think that's the most important thing. From our scheme of things, the way we know that things are working is obviously a certain degree of social noise, because there is no likes and dislikes and people and reviews and no appreciation. And then, of course, the ordering of the next season. So if a platform orders a subsequent season, it means it's obviously done well for them. And so they are also emboldened to, continue with it. So I think broadly it works like that, because, otherwise direct metrics, how much money they made or what exactly happened is something only the platform knows. And it's usually a black box for the subscriber platforms.
Right. So, this is an interesting bit. It's attribution. Now you launch a new show today, and by coincidence or whatever reason, the channel's marketing is at a low in general. Then they don't get as many new subscribers as you might have if it had happened at a different time. So how do you do attribution for how many new subscribers they got at the same time as your product launch?
Well, it's a business thing. They have very, very sort of complicated and intricate calendars. They have plans. They know what their season is. They know what they are betting on, what sequence of shows they are following, much like how we did in TV.
Right.
So like obviously when you're looking to launch a new series on TV, you look for your Diwali period, because Diwali is a big advertiser period and we expect to make more money. A lot of the viewership on TV is connected to slots. You get a 9 o'clock slot against some really competitive show, then you're in a bit of trouble. So I think in a similar way, the factor that will come into play that are you getting launched in the midst of a lot of traffic? Is there enough marketing effort going behind it? But these are a lot of decisions that platforms make. As content creators, as the content studio, we make the content, we make it to the best possible, and we do a lot of marketing around it ourselves. But the main push and thrust is driven by the platform.
Now, for a creative person like you, or a creative business like Applause, there's a new freedom because, like you were saying, that you can cater to almost any niche, which is not true in television. Television is always fairly defined boxes.
Right.
So how does that freedom translate to output and product and so on and so forth?
See, for a studio like us, we have one additional freedom attached to the otherwise available freedom, which is that we are also self-financed. So it allows us to go out there and do a lot more experimentation. It allows us to go and buy new material, develop new stories, new shows, get them written, and actually start producing them. So that's like quite liberating to be able to do that. It's almost like, as I always say, that what we are doing is making extended movies. So that's what we do with our series. They're like extended movies, and we are telling all kinds of stories. What this does is that it allows us to take some chances with the kind of stories we want to tell, with the kind of cast we want to. Like you take Scam, for example. Scam, we bought the book 3 years ago, Sucheta's book. We started writing and developing it. It took about a couple of years to do that. We cast it in a very unique manner. Hansal wanted to take Harsha, Prateek Gandhi as Harsha, and we went along with that. We therefore then built around it a full Gujarati kind of milieu of actors. Mukesh Chavra did a great job doing that casting. And we went ahead and shot it and made it. Now, you could argue that, if it had been, if there had been other people involved, there might have been a push for getting a bigger face or a bigger star, or, should we be safer and play with somebody who's more known? These kind of things happen. So I guess that's the liberating thing. The other thing, of course, is about being able to tell stories because, TV, as you said, is a one size fits all or tends to be that way. And in the case of movies, there's a lot riding in it. So here we are able to tell a lot of small and big stories, distinctive stories. And I think that's only going to happen more. Now that the platforms are here and now that this whole streaming world is, sort of really, going through the roof, what's happening is that we are increasingly seeing that this is content without borders. This is content without boundaries. This is, you can tell any kind of story. You should tell different kinds of stories and there will be audiences for it. And so that's become, and also audiences, importantly, the pandemic has really helped. Because what's happened is that a giant audience locked up in their houses has sampled a lot more than they otherwise would, right? So they've seen different things and they've seen international content. They've seen content with subtitles. They've seen shows from Mexico and Spain. New audiences have seen. There was always that elite cult in India that's been seeing all this stuff, but now new people have seen it. So it sort of opened up everyone's life and vision to, a lot more is possible. And I think that trend cannot be reversed now.
We've had Bollywood as a fairly large, almost ambassador for brand India. Are we going to see the OTT services also as large brand ambassadors, as in you spoke about how we consume international global content? Are you going to see a large diaspora or an international audience consuming content made by Applause in Bombay?
I think so. I think as it grows, see, for now, what we're doing is we're also focused on our primary market. Anytime you create content, you have, your core TG, and then you have your sort of your surround audience, so you're never making something like, oftentimes I hear this term about making content that travels. I don't think you can make content that travels. You've got to make content that resonates. And if it resonates first with a local audience and then with a global audience, it becomes something that's traveled. But nobody sets out to make something that will be appealing to people in India and in Mexico.
Sure.
That's a fallacy. So I think as we progress and as we are making shows and telling different stories, there will be things that will break out. And as we tell stories that are, for us, intensely local, but get that universal resonance, that appeal to people beyond our borders for the story that we're telling, not for the language we're telling it in. Right. So I think, and that is going to happen. There are so many examples around us in any case. Bollywood has done it. Most recently, there was Parasite, So that story is not being made for anyone else. It's a Korean story, but it's sort of, connected with everyone across the world.
So, in the early days of streaming services which came into India, we saw the temptation perhaps of safety to get big names, celebrities and the biggest stars onto the shows. And as time goes on, we are seeing less and less of that. So is it easier with a big celebrity, or is it still finally content is king and the story will win, like you described with Scam, for example?
Well, honestly, content is king and content has always been king. So, even when you take examples of using big celebrities, I think what big celebrities do is that they create an automatic draw. They help in marketing, obviously. They help in brand recognition. All of that. But then finally, for people to stick on and watch the show and continue to watch it, it will rest on the content. Like if you remember in 2000 when we did KBC with Mr. Bachchan, obviously Mr. Bachchan was the big draw to bring people into, sampling the show. But if the show hadn't been good, I don't think anything would have come of that. I don't think there's anything wrong in working with bigger names or bigger stars. As long as the story you're telling, because what people are finally watching is the story you're telling. That's why also big movies with big stars flop. They don't flop because people don't like stars anymore. They flop because people don't like that story. It did nothing for them. And on the flip, sometimes movies or shows with nobodies technically go out and become breakout hits. primarily because it was still the story. And that's what creates new stars.
What do you think the whole streaming service and the OTT business will do for content creators in the regional languages? And in that, what is Applause going to do?
I think it's the same thing. What's happening in Hindi will happen in the 4 South Indian languages, in Bengali, possibly in Marathi and Gujarati. There will be a sort of a growth in that, exactly like what happened with TV. Applause itself has, we've made 3 Tamil shows that are one released on Sony Live, 2 are coming on MX Player. We made 1 Kannada, Hindi, English crazy comedy with Danish Seth. That's an outrageous one. It's called Humble Politician Nagraj. We did a comedy in Gujarati, which is getting ready. So we've done some sort of work in that space. We're looking to do a lot more. I think these are very important markets. Much like India, in many ways, is like 2 or 3 countries. So there is obviously the big Hindi mainstream, and then there are the 4 South languages, and there's Bengali. So that's like sort of a spread. And I think as streaming services build their own businesses and build their sort of markets and audiences, these will become extremely important markets for them. They already are. I mean, Amazon has a fantastic collection of movies from Tamil and Telugu and Malayalam. They already have that. They will also gradually look to build series and other forms of original content. So I think in general, this market, when I say a mass of niches, it's not just the different demographics, it's also the language divisions. Like if you take Tamil Nadu, it's a very large niche in that space. It's a large number of people, both in India and abroad, who would consume Tamil content. So I think it's very interesting.
So, Samir, in the last 2 decades, certainly, satellite television content teams spent a lot of time doing research, understanding research, and trying to find insights to sort of course correct their content. How much time do you and your team spend on research? And if you do, what kind of research are you doing?
See, when we do research, we do research in that sense, but I think, research and data comes from various sources. So one is obviously, platforms will have a whole bunch of numbers of how customers behave. And then, that becomes a sort of a predictive analysis, which is why you see that, that icon which says, you may also like. We are always looking for sort of signs, consumer signals of where the market is headed. Now, the good thing with content is that, there are broad genres and broad sort of directions of what people like. And then once in a way, something new breaks out, and then it's a pickle, something new happens, and there's a trend. Everyone, the herd mentality that follows, there's a glut in the market, then something new happens to break away from that. So, the real trick is to not get caught right at the end of the trend.
Right.
Because caught at the end of the trend is really sad. And oftentimes when you're trying to do the first new unique thing, you might be too early in the market, right? So it's, I guess, that sense of timing. But mostly what we try and do is follow broader trends. So we try and follow broader trends and unique stories. That's our sort of formula. So like we know for a fact that crime is a big genre. Crime always works. Crime has always worked. We know for a fact that have discovered that people like homeland security and, stories of army and valor and, that kind of stuff. We know that people like comedies, right? Then there's the question of what kind of comedies. So we obviously act on those kind of signals. And then within that, we try and tell really unique stories. And once in a way, then we start doing new things. So like when we did Scam was one of the first financial biopics of the country, right? The closest that anything had come before that was, say, Guru, which was loosely based on Dhirubhai Ambani. Yeah. So, but beyond that, there's not really been too much in that space. So these are some chances to take. When things work out well, then of course, there's a lot of kudos for it. If they don't work out, then it's why did you do that? But broadly, I think we are trying to, and then we speak to people, we try and find out, talk to a lot of consumers. But my philosophy always has been that it's very hard to ask consumers what they want. I think you should give them an answer to that. Steve Jobs, I think, has articulated it best. So I think you've got to, follow some degree of gut, some degree of instinct, be generally right, and then look for unique stories, unique voices, unique faces and ideas, and put that out there.
We spoke about monetizing right at the top of this conversation. Now we come to it at the bottom. What is the role that brands have in OTT content? Do you think that it will happen that OTT will become, part ad-free, fully ad-free, and so on and so forth, to a much larger degree than we are seeing today?
See, today it's in a very funny place. If Netflix has 200 million subscribers globally, and say each of those have got about 5 users, that's a billion people, right? So you're talking about a billion people who technically watch a couple of hours of content every day and are not interrupted by ads, that do not come in contact with advertising and are probably not watching any other advertising fed medium, right? That's how the subscriber platforms work. Then, of course, you do have the ad-supported streaming platforms as well. And then you have, of course, the Freeview platforms, the TV and all of that. So currently, I think the way the streaming services are working, especially the subscriber platforms, there's no place for advertising in it. There's no place for brands to reach those customers. Now, of course, everyone always talks about immersive advertising and integrated into content. I mean, you heard that, we've been doing that since in the mid-90s, we used to talk about things like this. But they don't usually succeed very well, that kind of thing. So I think today, it's a very interesting phase going on for the brands and advertising itself. I don't think, obviously everyone continues to advertise and puts the ads here and there because that's what advertisers need. They need vehicles to reach their customers. But the subscription services are increasingly blocking that access. Not with great intent. It's just that the model is such. And I think consumers in general are looking to get away from advertising. So even on the internet, the most clicked button is the skip ad button. The switch off, the X to shut the window, to shut the pop-up. So actually, the only time you see advertising is maybe on a news channel or when you're watching live sport. So it's an interesting time as to what brands do with this new world and how it emerges.
Okay. And the last question, when are we likely to see, or are we likely to see, a film made in India for an American market?
So I don't know whether we, like Shekhar Kapoor has made Elizabeth. So you could argue that an Indian has made Elizabeth and therefore we've already done that. So Attenborough made Gandhi and Shekhar Kapoor made Elizabeth. So by that logic, then we are even Stevens. But that being said, I think what's going to happen is more than us making just content for Americans. It's about how America and how the West has managed to build a soft power that we watch content that they make for themselves, right? That would be the big achievement for us, is that when we are telling a great story here, it makes others in other cultures and in other countries also consume it. Whether they use subtitles or whether they use dubbing or whatever mechanism, but they must consume that. I think that will be a bigger achievement. Otherwise, a famous Indian director could well go and make a movie on an international figure, and that would be that. But I don't think that's I think our real win would be when we are able to genuinely export, Indian culture, Indian ethos, Indian storytelling as a soft power, much like how the Chinese have done. The Chinese have taken their kung fu and their martial arts and made it into a global phenomenon, and we never confuse it. We always know it's Chinese, right? So all that India has done so far is the song and dance and the Bollywood color and that kind of thing. But hopefully we can get to the point of being able to take some really powerful stories out of India and have the world see it in a more commercial way, not the art house route.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sameer. Look forward to seeing your breakthrough into Western markets or global markets.
Thank you so much.
And that was Sameer Nair sharing how OTT has enhanced content creation, production and consumption in India. Let's now take a look at the Mel cheat sheet. OTT has expanded content production, enabling creators to push new boundaries. There is a growing demand for regional content on OTT. Currently, advertising on subscription-based streaming platforms seems unlikely. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of Melt. Do follow us on social media. Our handle is Ready to Melt, and stay updated with all that's happening in the world of advertising and marketing with our daily Melt update on our website, readytomelt.com. I shall see you next week. Goodbye.